Hello and welcome at Book Lovers Companion. My name is Edith and we are back with another wonderful guest. As you can see, no chattering teacup, no CEO, no PAs. Everyone is busy and so am I. My wonderful guest is not across the bonds, but across the channel in the United Kingdom. Hello and welcome to the show, James Darnborough. Hello, James.
Greetings, and thank you very much, Edith. It's a great pleasure to be here.
It's wonderful to have you on the show, and we are going to talk about The Gambler's Game.
Yeah.
I would say it's historic true fiction. I mean, it's true fiction is a strange description, but in a way it is, isn't it? It's the story of your ancestor. It's set at the end of the 19th century, from the West to Monte Carlo. It was an intriguing tale. It was fascinating to read, an interesting character. James, what can you tell us about this book without giving too much away, of course?
Well, thanks. Okay, my grandfather was an American from the Midwest, born in the 1869, it's a long time ago. And he was a baseball player and then became a roulette player. And he is the only American to break the bank at Monte Carlo, playing roulette, where he lived in Monte Carlo before moving to England. So he was very, very famous. And it's a very well-reported story. Lots of people have written about it. Of course, everyone wants to know how he did it. So it was suggested to me that I write a screenplay about this because I live in Los Angeles, and so everybody's about screenplays. Everybody's a producer, and everybody's connected. And actually, my wife suggested to me, you know what? Why don't you write the whole book? So as to your question about the genre, this is interesting because it could have been a biography. And it could have been total fiction, but I found an in-between. So it's what we call historical biographical fiction. Everything has a label these days. So it's based on the facts, and there's an awful lot of information you can find out about someone who was, he was in the newspapers all the time because of baseball, and he ran his own casino in Illinois, and then he was in Monte Carlo making lots of money. So there's a lot of newspaper archives you can piece together like a jigsaw puzzle. And then it's basically filling in the spaces. So I wanted all the characters to come alive. So there's a real people, but I'm giving them a voice and putting some action in and turning it from, rather than just relating a series of chronological events. I think what I've created, and I hope that your listeners will enjoy, an adventure rather than just reporting the facts as they were. So it was a real journey for me as well. Discovering doing all the research and finding it all out. It was an adventure for me, and it took 3 years.
Oh, yeah, I can imagine. That's one of the questions I have in my book, the research. But like you said, it is indeed an adventure. I mean, you tell a story, like you said, from him becoming a professional baseball player, much to the annoyance of his mother. And there's also an interesting tale. I mean, her story would also be fascinating because we only get a few glimpses because it's his story you were telling. And from baseball player to, like you said, roulette player, and from America's West to, again, Monte Carlo, owning his own business. Yeah. And then being this man who had acquaintances of people who were very famous themselves, from the Rothschilds to, I don't know.
I know.
Mobility.
Well, it's amazing that this was a very exciting time certainly in America, because suddenly they had electricity and telephones and then cars and all kinds of, then they invented airplanes. I mean, so people had this great sort of frontiers spirit and most people, of course, just want to put food on the table. They just want to survive or get across the Rocky Mountains to California or whatever. But if baseball was everything, because this is before American football, so baseball, and it's before cinema, so the baseball players were like the movie stars of the day. And so he was very gifted as a pitcher, which means a very strong right arm. And that was his ticket out of rural Illinois. Now, luckily, a lot of people stayed behind to farm the land, but that wasn't in his future. So baseball, long before any idea of gambling, it was baseball that really got him out. So I mean, all those players, they all have interesting stories to tell because they're from all over the place with different kinds of backgrounds, and so exploring those characters was an absolute joy. They all had these magnificent moustaches.
Well, they did look different than people look today, most certainly. You said there was a span of 3 years where you did research for this book. Where did you start? I suppose in your own home with your own family, getting, I don't know, letters or diaries sorted. How did it all start, your research?
That you're exactly right. That's how it started, because we're very lucky that in my family we tend to hang on to important things, and I came to England, and I was writing scenes that were based in England, like Ascot races and things like that. And my mother, who is 94 years old, came down the stairs one day, and she had in her hand a little badge, and it is an Ascot Royal Enclosure badge that you put on your lapel here to get entry to the Royal Enclosure of Ascot, which is a big horse racing meeting every summer in England. And it was from my grandmother, Frances Erskine Shaw, handwritten from 1909. And she just happened to find it in a drawer, just randomly. And then I found lots of letters. Unfortunately, the only letters that normally you are able to see are the ones that are received. I would have loved to have seen the ones that were sent. But yeah, lots of little bits and pieces, lots and lots of newspaper clippings. And of course, now, you can go onto newspaper archives sites and you can find anything that was ever printed in a newspaper anywhere. And that's amazing. So that's where, but a lot of the ideas come from, tiny, tiny little things that you may have thought were really insignificant. But when you start a project like that, you find out that everything is so important because it's a big jigsaw puzzle.
Yeah, absolutely. And your grandfather, he was a fascinating character. Like you said, he wanted to get out of rural America, neither being a farmer nor a lawyer.
No.
As his stepfather wanted him to be. And yeah, he got around a bit. He saw things. He experienced a lot, even in the United States. I mean, what you mentioned, I mean, Klondike, the gold rush.
Yeah.
And again, the casino he owned. Fascinating stuff. And even when he came to Europe, there was a lot of things he experienced for him for the first time, and the people he met. That was also fascinating. Learning how to drive, something we take for granted. Owning a car, learning to drive. Also for him, learning how to dress appropriately. Because there is this scene where you have him ask, what should I wear when I go to Ascot, like you said.
Yes. And it's complicated.
Yeah.
It's really because it's not like you've seen a film about it.
Yeah.
You've seen it on TV. It's, so somebody just randomly, he's trying to integrate into English society. And somebody says, well, come with us to Ascot. And, so come to Ascot. And and then, obviously this is really difficult because you could be the most confident person in the world,
Yeah.
but if you're put into a brand new situation, it's hard. And so, he would be absolutely fine next to a roulette wheel, but suddenly you've got all these lords and ladies milling around in top hats
Mm.
and beautiful dresses and the rest of it. And I imagine that he felt quite out of place, but apparently it worked, and he did quite well. And I think that's really interesting because this is a bit like most things in life, is that you shouldn't be afraid to ask for help.
Yeah.
And that's certainly the case with writing. Is
Mm.
that, and I think Bill probably was, unlike me, he was probably better at asking for help than
Mm.
than a lot of people. I mean,
Mm.
and he had someone, actually a German racing driver, who taught him how to drive in Monte Carlo, which is quite handy. So yeah, lot, lot,
Ab-
lots of interesting things, because
yeah.
it's not about necessarily being successful.
Yeah.
It's about trying to make friends in a new country.
Mm. Yeah.
It's
True.
hard.
And I found his choice of game also interesting. And he played, like you said, roulette. He didn't play cards.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I gathered from the book was a cards game is a bit more dangerous than playing roulette, because with roulette, there is always the chance. It's harder to develop a system, because that's what you said at the beginning. People wanted to know how he did it.
Yeah.
And there were a few tiny things that could be observed. But in the end, the casinos caught up with what helped the professional players to earn or win a lot of money.
Yes. Well, in the early days, there was a lot of, so I say, subterfuge, because you could walk into a big casino. There was one in Saratoga in New York State, run by Richard Canfield in the 1890s. You could walk in there and you could look at all the different roulette wheels over like a week and look for what's called a bias. And a bias means there's something slightly wrong with the level of the wheel, and there's a propensity for it to land in a specific zone. And the Monte Carlo caught on to that very quickly after a guy called Joseph Jagger, who was an Englishman who won a lot of money. And so after that, every single morning, and they still do, every morning, now they use computers and lasers, but in those days they used spirit levels to check. So there was absolutely no way to cheat, to beat the wheel by cheating. But yeah, I mean, I try to put as much of this in the book as possible without being, tedious about it, because this is not a book that will teach you how to win, how to break the bank at Monte Carlo, I'm afraid. Otherwise, I would have invited you to my yacht for this podcast. But it certainly is. It certainly is about patience and resilience and knowing when to walk away and all these things. So it's interesting because there's like a lot of life lessons in this as well,
Yep.
because it does reflect our decision making, what decisions we make in life. And as I said, the most important thing is knowing when to walk away.
Yeah, indeed. And he was not an addict, because unlike other people he observed who played because they were addicted to the game, to the gambling, he wasn't. For him, it was, as far as I could gather, it was a way of earning money. And like you said, knowing when to walk away, have patience. He also learned this kind of resilience, patience, walking away when he played baseball. And I would say it's completely different, using gambling as a way to earn money or being addicted to it, like a drug addict.
Yeah, exactly right. And that's I thank you for bringing that up, because that's very important. Because in no way would I want to suggest that gambling is a good idea to make a living. It really isn't. It's But also, what's interesting about what you just said is that there is a connection there, which is that in those days, if you were a baseball pitcher, you had to pitch for 3 days consecutively for one game,
Mm,
and there were no relief pitchers, so you were out there in the hot sun the whole time,
mm.
and so you'd be trying to wear the other team down. Now with roulette, Bill Darnborough lived in Monte Carlo for 8 years, and he lived in the Hotel de Paris. And there's a secret tunnel which still exists between Hotel de Paris and the casino Monte Carlo.
Oh, okay.
And so he would literally commute to work underneath this tunnel. And he played, and he wrote about this. And I have 8 pages that he typed up in 1932, which has sort of helped me gain an
Hmm.
insight into. But for him, it was like going to the office.
Yeah.
This was his working day, and he would work for 8 hours a day
Mm.
at the roulette table. And I don't, anyone that's played roulette, it is not the most exciting game. Unless you bet your house on it, then it gets exciting very quickly. But no, he throughout his whole life, he saw 25 years of doing this.
Yeah.
He saw a lot of people do a lot of stupid things because people would just arrive and hope that they could double their money. So they're
Mm.
not even playing the numbers; they're just playing, red or black or odd or even, trying to double their money and walk away, which is just completely luck.
Mm.
Whereas he applied, as I say, great patience.
Yeah.
That's the main thing, and not taking big risks.
Mm.
But there we go.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there was also this thing with not only professional gamblers, but also this moment when he was approached by a man who wanted him to play for them and they would finance his games. And he said, they know when things like that are going on. They already have an eye on me because I have gained some fame already, and they would take a closer look. And he wasn't willing to play their game.
The rule in Monte Carlo was that you could only play with your own money. Well, the main rule is that no one who lives in Monte Carlo, who is a monegasque, is allowed in the casino. So they're not allowed to gamble at all,
Mm.
because otherwise the country wouldn't be in the wonderful position it is now.
Yeah.
So a lot of people approached him and said, here's money, or join a syndication, and we want a cut of the winnings. But luckily, he never did that, because that never ends well.
Yeah.
There are many films been made about this sort of thing, and no, you don't want to get in bed with the mob, as it were.
Yeah.
So luckily, he kept to himself.
Mm. And how much did it help that he had his own casino, because he had his mentor, his first father-in-law, he mentored him. He died way too young. And after owning the business himself, it wasn't that successful for a rather short time.
Yes. So he was a wonderful gambler, but not a great businessman, which is fine, because I think the same is probably true the other way around. His sort of university of life was in this wonderful little place called Bloomington in Illinois, in the Midwest, and Hiram Lewin ran the casino there, right opposite the courthouse. And the building, I've been to the building, and the building is still there, and it's just magnificent to think that. And it's a really, really deep building. There's a restaurant in front, which was where they sold steaks and beer and things, and then they had roulette and cards behind, and it was all totally legal, of course, because the courthouse was right opposite. And I imagine that some of the employees of the courthouse went in there regularly as well. Anyway, so he started life as a croupier. And of course, this is the best way to learn anything, is that, if you want to own a factory, start sweeping the floor. And so he watched how not to do it. So he would probably see a lot of people every day who come in and do a lot of reckless things, and realize that there were some people who knew what they were doing, because they knew if they were on a losing streak, just stop and walk away. So yeah, he would have learned a lot from watching other people with their money,
Yeah.
and of course that enabled him to make money to begin this big sort of odyssey, this
Mm,
big journey
mm.
as well. But and then of course then as you know, then he went on with his own roulette wheel around the
Yeah,
whole of the
yeah.
everywhere.
I do have to say, I felt sorry for his first wife.
Yes, Livy, I
Yeah.
know. I know. Unfortunately, she was a casualty of the adventure. Unfortunately, um, it, life happens. I
Mm.
you know I can't apologize for his behavior, but although I feel I should.
No,
I
no, it's
mean,
not your
you-
responsibility.
let's not spoil it for people who haven't read it yet. But it's not. Yeah. Anyway, there's we've all made decisions in our life
Yeah.
that we that we question years later.
Mm. Do you know what became of her? How long she lived?
Yes,
Or
I
if,
actually I do. She got married again,
mm.
and she seems to have had a very happy and stable life. And in
Mm.
fact, she's buried. Believe it or not, she's buried in Los Angeles.
Oh,
Yeah, the Forest Lawn Cemetery, which
oh,
is
okay.
just extraordinary. My wife's grandparents are in the same place. I know,
Oh.
it's it really really interesting. And I think this happened in the 1920s. There was this big migration to Hollywood,
Mm. Mhm.
because the film industry was just emerging. So a lot of
Okay.
people from the Midwest um, came down to Hollywood to see who's this Charlie Chaplin character.
Another Englishman.
I know, another Englishman. Buster Keaton was American.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, it was a booming industry already at the time, wasn't it then, Hollywood?
Yeah, completely, and because of the weather. And that's true of many places in the world have reliable weather. They become great film locations.
Oh.
But Hollywood it was extraordinary though, because suddenly there was a requirement for all kinds of people, lawyers,
Yeah.
which is predominantly what Hollywood is made of these days. and, but
Yeah, everywhere.
anyone who had skill, no, but anyone who was a carpenter or an
Yeah, yeah,
electrician, or all of these different things. If you're a hairdresser, or it doesn't matter what you did. If you shine shoes, that was Hollywood. Was literally the spotlight was
yeah,
shining up in the sky, and yeah, it took off. But of course, by that time, my grandfather was long gone,
yeah.
and he missed all of that.
Well,
For,
it's interesting. More goes on behind the camera than in front of the camera, actually, come to think of it.
oh, of course, of course. Look at the credits on any
Yeah,
film.
absolutely.
1,000 people. Yeah, yeah.
And James, may I ask, you said it research took 3 years, and there was a lot to research, I suppose. And how did you went on about structuring the book? I mean, you have this huge amount of research, not getting lost or in a rabbit hole of research, and then starting and structuring your book. How did you manage that? How did you go about that? What can you tell us about this process of writing the book itself?
Very, very good question, and very important, especially if you're new to writing, is to try and keep it as simple as possible. Because I don't know about you, but I'm not a great fan of flashbacks, and now we have another Englishman, Christopher Nolan, who's a film director, and he likes making films from different perspectives and different timelines, and it goes forwards and backwards and whatever. I don't have number one, I don't have the skill to do that. But number two, I don't want to confuse the reader. So what I did is I wrote the entire book in the present tense in chronological order, which means that you literally are on the journey with the central character, the whole way. So you learn about what it's like to be on the road with the baseball team as he does. And then you learn what the saloons are like in these different cities. And going to places like St. Louis and San Francisco, which was a really, really dangerous place to be in the 1890s. And so you go on this journey with it. And then when he sails across the Atlantic on his wonderful steamship and arrives in the sparkling, glittering Monte Carlo. So that's basically how I did it. Then it gets a bit more complicated because then you have to, you think you've finished, and actually, I think the first time I thought I'd finished, I was still about a year away from being actually finished. So I had two editors, and for very specific reasons, I had not just overall editors. I had editors that I needed for very specific things, letter writing from a female perspective, and things like that. And then I think I did 12 drafts in total. Difficult to say. And then, of course, then you have to take things out, which is really tough. I mean, this is like surgery. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
that's the hard part, isn't it? What to
it's
leave
I know
and what to take out.
it's really hard because and there's some great scenes that I would have loved to have kept in. Like there was a horse riding scene in Colorado that's just
Oh,
disappeared. I know, but the thing is, it's not central to the plot and the
oh,
story. And I have to keep you. I want you to be, because it really is an adventure, and I wanted it to be very easy to read,
mm,
and it is. And I didn't want to go off on these tangents that are very. That's a very self-indulgent thing to do as well for a writer, is to just, I can write about the hills are alive and all of that. It's not necessary, because you want to get to the next station on this train line,
yeah,
and so you don't need to be going off and doing all these irrelevant things. As fun as it is to write, it's I think the same is with making films.
mm,
You know, you there are a lot of film directors who are very self-indulgent, who want to show you how creative they are, and actually you just want to see, you want to see if he wins the money in Monte Carlo.
yeah, I know what you mean. And you think, okay, that could have been shorter. Thank you very much for that.
Exactly. So it's a ruthless process. But that was a very long way of answering your question, which is that I really kept it
Yeah,
as simple as possible. I've written it in the present tense,
yeah.
so it's not this happened and this happened. It's this is what's happening now.
It's also important for the pace, which
Yeah.
time you use. And have you thought of writing it in a first person narration?
Um, One of the things that I did a lot of research about is something called head hopping. And
Hmm.
head hopping is an expression that means that you understand the thoughts
Yeah,
of both. So during the interview, James um, noticed that the sun had just
yeah,
come in through the window, and he thought, oh, it's going to be a lovely day. Edith was thinking, I hope I get to go out this afternoon, because so basically what's happening here is the person is understanding my thoughts and your thoughts.
yeah.
Now, I didn't want to do that either.
Mm,
So you basically only say that there is a narrator, and it's written in American English,
yeah.
but then becomes a bit more English as we go on. But you get Bill's perspective only.
Mm,
And so it's him trying to interpret the people and the
hmm.
places around him. And so you understand his feelings, but only
Yeah,
his feelings. Because
yeah,
again, that's, to me, it's about keeping it as simple as possible.
yeah. Yeah, understandable. And what was the part you struggled the most with during the writing process?
I think the so I went to an English private school just for boys a long time ago,
Mhm.
and um, basically what that means is that I have no idea about emotions. So this is part of our upbringing. I don't know if the same could be said for Austria, but I really struggled when there was um, the love interest of how that developed.
Mm.
Because now I've got to, for example, when they're exchanging letters.
Mhm.
So now I've got to try and describe the lady's emotions as she's interacting in the very early part of this relationship with our main character. So I asked for some help on that
Yeah.
from somebody who writes historical fiction in exactly this timeline in the 1890s, 1900, and she's from a small town in Midwestern America, now lives in Rhode Island. And um, I asked for help to make it make sense. So yeah, that was. I mean, you can tell just from the way I'm trying to describe it that I really struggled with that. And you're nodding your head and going, "Yep, I can see how that would be a problem
It,
for you."
well, it can be also the fact that it's the female character in your book. I mean, it's also might be a bit difficult.
Right,
Get that
exactly.
right.
And men are from Mars and women from Venus.
Yeah.
There
Something
is
like that.
this that but again, I wanted it, I needed it to be as authentic as
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah.
And that was so important
Mm.
because there is a very, very big life-changing decision that
Mm.
happens as a result of all that interaction. And so
Absolutely. Yeah.
it has to be absolutely right. And
Yeah.
so again, I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. Do not be afraid to ask for help.
Mm.
So all the
Yeah.
writers that are listening to this, please understand there is so many resources out there
Mm.
that you could use to find help. And it doesn't mean that
Yeah.
you've got to empty your bank account to find an
Yeah.
editor.
Yeah.
You can ask for help on very, very small things.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
yeah, and it really helps just to talk to people about it, actually.
Yeah, and it's even easier these days because of the internet. I mean, it might be a pain in the backside sometimes, but it also is a great help, like you said, especially for writers and for aspiring writers. And I wanted to mention, I mean, female emotions. I suppose it wasn't that easy for women back then either. I mean, we always think of the fainting women, but they only fainted because of the the way they dressed and so on, and not so much because they were overwhelmed. But nobody tells us that. We always say, she's overwhelmed with feelings. No, she should wear something else. Maybe.
Yeah, less tight
Yeah.
corsets. I mean, it was almost criminal, actually, how women were forced to adhere to
Yeah.
the trends of the day. Luckily, they were saved by the 1920s. But yes, you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Before that was I think it was a real struggle, actually, to be a woman in that at that time.
Yeah.
And luckily, there were a lot of wonderful people who, the suffragettes,
Yeah.
who made sure that the vote happened and the rest of it. But there were a lot of pioneering women who were, the first people to do, long airplane flights. There was this
Yeah.
wonderful lady. She was the wife of Mercedes. Do you know about this?
I
Um,
mean, the Mercedes is named after a woman.
Daimler,
Yeah.
or
Yeah,
was it
Daimler.
her?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Right. So,
Benz and Daimler, yeah.
yeah, and she went on the longest journey in a car
Yeah.
across Germany, where the roads were, those are practically old cobbled Roman roads.
Mm.
There was a woman in America who drove a huge, huge distance on her own. And there, you see, unfortunately, of course, that's what it took, because that's how you get in the newspapers. But,
Yeah.
but not much has changed, actually, but that really helped. We'll call it the women's movement. But there were certainly, as you see in my book, actually, it was the women in Bill's life that really had the biggest influence on him and his decision making, for sure.
Yeah.
And I think that, I mean, again, in some respects, there's two ways of looking at it. You can look at it and say, oh, it's awful that women had no rights then, or you can look at the very positive aspects of it and think about what happened right then.
Yeah.
Because again, that's when everything started to change for the good.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Possibilities. There were possibilities for the women, but also for the man. A man like him, it wouldn't be possible these days, I suppose, doing what he did back then.
Well, no, I mean, he would have designed an app, or
maybe, yeah, maybe.
Something he may have never left the little town in southern Illinois, because he could have designed something really clever from his garage. Yeah. But it's very interesting, because on the one hand, this is somebody who had really traveled the world and done all these things, but at the same time, he was quite lonely.
Yeah.
Because really, the pastime that he chose, playing roulette is not a sociable sport. You don't
No.
talk to anyone ever. Yeah, unless it's I don't know. Anyway, so that's a sort of another dimension to this that also makes it interesting, is that this isn't one big party at all.
No.
This is a man's, he obviously he had his demons that he wrestled with.
Yeah.
And so fortunately, in real life, actually, it was a woman that managed to I don't know, give him purpose.
Mm. And was that also the reason why he stopped playing? Was she the reason, or did he set himself a goal?
There's a film that came out 2 years ago, Downton Abbey.
Yeah.
Did you ever watch Downton Abbey?
Of course, who didn't?
Lots of people. Anyway, they made a film about it, and within the film, there's part of the plot is a film crew comes to Downton Abbey, and this is in the days of silent movies. They agree to this because they want to make money to fix the roof. And anyway, the film is called The Gambler, and the main character is called Bill, and the woman is called Miss Erskine, which is my grandmother's name, and she spends the whole time trying to convince him to stop playing roulette. So what happened is that the writers, including Julian Fellowes, have actually used my grandparents in the Downton Abbey film as characters. And so this is what happened in real life. Now, again, I don't want to spoil the book for those people who have yet to read it, but I think between us, we've given enough clues now as to what happens.
Yeah, true. I mean, Downton Abbey, who hasn't seen it? I mean, over here, most people.
Okay.
And
great.
Yeah, I suppose. And my favorite character will always be Violet Crawley.
Oh,
I mean, Maggie Smith, she gets the best lines.
She does get the best lines. Well, I'm very grateful to Julian Fellowes and everyone who worked on Downton Abbey, because it means that there are a lot of people who are interested in that time period, which is exactly the time period that this is set in. I
mean, this whole enterprise of Downton Abbey. Sorry, I'm drifting away again, but this whole enterprise. I mean, it was filmed in Highclere Castle. The past of this family, Lord Carnarvon, who financed Howard Carter, and this is also fantastic to know about that as well. I mean,
I know, and that's the thing, is that a lot of characters are based on real people.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel that a similarity in a very small way to that. But there's, a lot has happened because of that as well. Yeah. There are other things, like in America, I don't know, there's a series called The Gilded Age.
Gilded Age, yeah.
Right, which is directly because of Downton Abbey, of course. But again, very successful. And this is exactly the same time period that my story is set in. So it's really helpful
Yeah.
to know that this is an interesting time. I think the most interesting decade in the history, certainly of America, is the 1890s, because that's when everything started to change and there was
Mm-hmm.
no war. Was the main
Yeah.
thing, that the country was at peace, apart from the small business of the Spanish-American War, but everyone forgets that. But apart from that,
I know what you mean, because the same could be said for Europe, can it
yeah,
not? I mean, of course there were these conflicts, but not most of them not directly in Europe. Europe was peaceful at the time, even at the
yeah,
beginning of the next century. So that's what made it so interesting. We have a lot of innovations, like you said, a
completely,
lot of change
yes,
in society, but also technology.
yes.
So that I agree. I mean, that's what makes it so interesting. Don't get me wrong. I also like the Victorian era. It's always fascinating to read books that are set in the Victorian era. But I would agree. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I found it absolutely amazing because whenever I give talks in California, I always start by saying how we all have a bit of gambling within us.
Yeah.
Just crossing the street in
Mm,
the traffic,
mm.
flying in an airplane, swimming in
Yeah.
the sea. But imagine what it was like for the people who crossed the Rocky Mountains
Yeah.
in those days, because the conversation with your little children would
Mm.
include the question, what are our odds of getting
Yeah.
over the Rocky Mountains before winter
Yeah.
and getting to what's on the other side in
Yeah.
California, you
Yeah.
know? And because this is before Hollywood, before anything. So, that's another thing that makes this time very, very exciting, is because it's not about the grand explorers that we know about, because the people
Yeah.
were going to the Arctic and the Antarctic and everything else. This was just about families,
Yeah.
who barely had shoes on their feet,
Yeah.
and they constant fear and peril and danger. And it's just about normal people.
Yeah.
And so that's what makes this a very exciting time in history, aside from all the other amazing, as you said,
Mm.
the innovation in peacetime
Yeah.
is so innovation for good, not
Yeah.
bad, is great.
Yeah.
And all the
Yeah.
things that happened, but the motor car thing that features very highly in my book,
Yeah.
because this was so exciting. The Germans and
Yeah.
the Italians and the French and all these designers were
Yeah.
arriving, like Maybach and all the rest of them. I mean, these are names we still know today.
Mm-hmm.
All these incredible and they races.
Mm.
Races were
Yeah.
amazing, especially in France. They were, I mean, look, so you had to be quite wealthy to
Yeah.
own a motor
Yeah.
car. And so a lot of these very famous people were killed in
Yeah.
these rallies,
Yeah.
in the Paris, Madrid. And then, of course, so in my book, Bill's at the very first Monte Carlo rally in 1911.
Mm.
And the people who were involved in that were superstars.
Yeah.
They were like, now we have Lewis Hamilton and Michael Schumacher and Verstappen and all these people. These were those guys
Yeah.
in the very, very early days.
Yeah.
Anyway, I find it a fascinating time in our history.
Yeah, also the little things. That's what I found interesting when I researched for my book, where the little things are about the amenities. When you go to a ballet here in Vienna and say, okay, could we have a shower? Yes, you could have a shower because it was already there in 1903. You could have a shower. And maybe other things like central heating and so on. Was that even a thing? And so on. What else did we have? What else could we do or to make it nicer, make life nicer?
Yeah.
Mostly upstairs, downstairs. Well, also a bit easier, but you know what I mean.
I know exactly what you mean. I was in the back of a London taxi last week, and I said, "Isn't it?" And it's electric.
Yeah.
And I said, "Isn't it amazing that the last time the taxis in London were electric was 1905?" And he had no idea what I was talking
Yeah.
about. So I told him, yeah, they were called the hummingbirds because they sounded like hummingbirds and they were electric. All the taxis in London in those days were electric and very, very quiet, which was a real problem. because
Mm.
people were used to the horses,
Yeah.
blibbly clop, blibbly clop, and then suddenly there was these silent black
Yeah.
taxis. But it's so funny, isn't it? Because everyone goes, "Oh, finally, we've invented electric taxis! Aren't we clever? This is amazing." Nope,
No.
you were around
No.
a really, really long time
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah. Nearly at the same time as the other way of transport was invented by Rudolf Diesel and so on.
Of course, I know.
Yeah.
I know. It's very interesting. But again, this illustrates how extraordinary that time was,
Yeah.
because there were all these things happening. I think it was probably the most exciting time to be alive, honestly, to see all these things being invented all at once. The idea that you had electricity in your house
Mm-hmm. Yep.
is as strange as when we were growing up, the idea that everyone would have a computer in their house. Or you'd be able to carry a telephone around in your pocket.
Yeah.
Think all these things just happened all at once in the car and the radio. I mean, the radio was just the most incredible. It was something that really did change the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that I really enjoyed writing about in the book was Bill's sitting in Denver, I think, in Colorado, and in the newspaper, it's talking about the Paris World's Fair. All these inventions that are going to be on display in Paris. It's called the name of the building actually was used in the Paris Olympics. It's the most magnificent building, and this was at the World's Fair. And that was one of the things that got Bill interested and excited about traveling the world, is to see all these amazing new inventions and things.
Understandable.
Yeah.
And like you said, I mean, today we put the mobile phone in our pocket, but back then you already had a phone at home. God, what's next? Yeah. Like you said, electricity and cars and oh dear God. I mean, when you come to think of it, how worried people were when the trains started to transport people from, I don't know, London to Bristol and so on. Cows might explode. Who knows?
Yes. I know. Although the train, I mean, in my opinion, the railways made America.
Yeah.
Because in those days, I got to say, the railways in America are awful now. But in those days, there was really this spider's web of railways that went to every tiny little town.
Yeah.
They went everywhere. Consequently, the rail journey itself was really, really long because they stopped all the time. But nevertheless, you could go anywhere. You could go anywhere.
Absolutely.
In the United States and South America as well. Certainly in Central America, the Mexican railways were really sophisticated. And so that's how he managed to get around with the baseball team.
Yeah.
But they were long trips, like Denver to Kansas was 35 hours. And it's not, if you look on Google Maps, it shouldn't be that long.
Yeah.
But it's because in those days, there were many, many, many more stops. And people would jump off and get water and sandwiches and things. And a lot of the trains were amazing. Well, some of the trains, they had their own printing press on the train, so they could print a newspaper and deliver and sell it on the train. So the train had its own newspaper.
Oh, incredible!
And then there were extraordinary things like Paderewski, the great pianist from Poland, and he had his own railway carriage, and he would hook it up to the train. Inside was his white Steinway piano, and he would tour across the whole of the Europe and just wheel out his piano and go into one of the beautiful German opera houses and play. So that's music was transported on a train.
Yep. Brought to the people on the edge, on the frontier.
Exactly. Yeah.
I absolutely agree. James, you've spoken a little bit about it, but let me ask you, what would be your advice for any other author?
The most important thing is to keep going. Keep going, keep going, keep going. But you don't have to do it all today. So try and plan as much as you can a schedule for researching, writing, editing. Now, everybody's different in how they approach their writing. Some people edit as they go along. Some people prefer to just do the whole thing and worry about the editing later. So I'm not gonna, I can't say which one is best. In my experience, having completed this project, the most important advice I'll go back to is that you must ask for help, because all writers at some point in their journey feel like an island, and you feel like Robinson Crusoe, and you start making up characters to talk to, and so that's important. Ask for help. The other thing I found really useful is to read it all out loud. Read it all out loud and record it, and listen to it back, because then you get an idea of what it feels like for the reader to read it. Because you just reading it back, it isn't good enough. It might be for people who are very skilled and experienced in this, but for me that wasn't enough, because when I started listening to myself reading it out loud, I thought, okay, that's something that I can change. That's something I can make better, or that's something that's unnecessary. We can take it out. So I think that's probably my number one thing that not everyone might know about is read it out loud, record it, and listen to it back.
Mm.
And also take advantage of technology. So I use audio notes. So whatever you use, Google or Siri or Alexa or whatever, you can be driving down the autobahn or the freeway or whatever, and you can just think of something and go, "Hey Siri, new note," and just say something that just occurred to you. And I did that all the time. Something really obscure, like the color of the sea or something. Yeah. How many ways can you describe the Mediterranean Sea? Wow.
Yeah, but I do understand. Absolutely. Good point.
Yeah.
Audio notes. You're the first one to
Yeah, audio
mention
notes,
that.
very handy, very handy. Because I don't know, it's because this kind of thing never stops, does it?
Yeah,
You don't just
no.
you don't sit down and say, "This is my writing time." It's all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. There are ideas you have. There's something you see or hear,
Yeah.
and you think, "Oh yeah, that would work well for
Absolutely.
me." In I don't know, whatever happened in chapter 6.
Yeah,
or
true.
15. Right.
True. You're constantly your brain is constantly working. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely
Right.
understand.
But again, I mean, this is about embracing technology and using
Yeah.
it to your advantage rather than being afraid of it, and that's another thing. But there's lots and lots and lots of help out there, and don't feel overwhelmed by it. Know what kind of help you're looking for and seek it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And what are your plans? What can we look forward to from you, James?
Now, this is interesting because there is an opportunity for a sequel, but there's also an opportunity for a prequel, because the background to Bill's existence is actually really, really interesting. And so that's what I have no definitive answer right now, because I mean, this was a really massive, exhausting 3-year project where I had to stop everything to do this. So apart from that, the other thing I'm doing is I'm trying to get it developed for the screen. So it does help that I live in LA. We've got a couple of guys in New York who are saying it should be a feature film, and then we've got a couple of guys in LA who say no, it should be an 8-part series on Netflix or HBO or whatever. So that's something that I'm trying to kick down doors about right now. But that's I mean that because the story has everything. for the film.
Yep.
For
Yep.
I mean, the characters. There's 173
Yep.
characters that are real people.
Yep.
And I've listed all the characters at the back of the book. But the baseball and the Old West and the Gilded Age New York and then the Downton
Yep.
Abbey, Chicale,
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
it sounds like a screenplay already to me.
It sounds like a at least 4-season TV show.
Oh, 4 seasons. Oh, I love that. Okay.
Yes.
Right.
I'm very partial to TV shows or series, be it, like I said, TV or streaming service, because then you can go more deeper into the characters and what is going on than in a film.
Absolutely right. And this is, because it's chronological, it is quite episodic.
Yep.
There are the chapters. I hope the chapters lead on neatly to each other.
Yep.
But there's a timeline, and so there are clear, especially because it's logistically there are different cities that he goes to and even different countries. But the characters are amazing. So the audiobook was really, really fun because I had to find someone who was American who could do accents. So there's Italian and Russian and Scottish army officer, English ladies, French monogat. There's a Mexican casino owner, an unscrupulous French Canadian gambler. I mean, so he had to do all those different accents.
Yeah.
I'd love to see. I'd love to be the casting director on that.
Ooh.
Yeah. There's a lot of opportunities for a lot of very interesting characters to come alive. For that.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Pooh, there are so many possibilities. Come to think of it, not 4 seasons. What am I saying? 5 seasons. Make that 5.
5 seasons.
At least.
You heard it here first.
And I have to say, I mentioned it at the beginning, prequel, his mother's story and so on. I'm very partial to the prequel.
Yes.
I have to say. Because I'm absolutely intrigued. Because we only get a few glimpses in your book, naturally, of course. So it would be interesting, like you said, to learn where he came from. What is the story behind all that?
Yeah. I've got a newspaper clipping from Illinois from 1873, which is about her, and it calls her the she-devil murderer of Lebanon, because Lebanon was the name of the town.
Yeah.
And we could take it from there.
Yeah, absolutely. Whew. Yeah, I'm waiting for it. Netflix, Amazon, whoever.
Right. Whoever.
Make it a TV show, make it a streaming show, make it happen.
I promise you, I'm doing my best. I'm absolutely doing my best. But obviously, I'm going to encourage everyone to read the book first.
Yeah, of course. Because this is a journey you won't regret going on.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But the audiobooks are amazing too. I'm so happy with the audiobook.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah,
we were very lucky to find Kevin Clay is his name. We were very lucky to find him to do that.
Yeah, great to hear. Wonderful. James, is there anything else you would like our listeners to know?
Well, I would encourage people to go to thegamblersgame.com because that is the hive of activity. And that has reviews and videos and a lot of insights and fun things going on. And then there's the links to the social media, which are just endless, of course, these days. But it all comes from The Gambler's Game. His name is Bill Darnborough. And so look out for, sign up for the newsletters. I have to say, these podcasts are so much fun. They really are. Having a chance for me to, because when I give prepared speeches, that's all very interesting. But it's the questions and answers at the end that are really interesting. And so podcasts are fantastic because the questions begin immediately.
Yeah, that's true.
You don't have to listen to me pitching or whatever. We go straight into the questions and answers, and it's great. And hopefully, there's people who are listening in, all over the world.
They
So
do.
thank you so much for having this amazing platform, and thank you to all of your listeners for tuning in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for joining us or joining me. It was absolutely great talking to you. So please wait for me in the green room. I will be with you shortly.
Okay. Thank you.
Dear listeners, we do hope you enjoyed this episode as much as my guest and I did. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. And tune in next time at Book Lovers Companion. Until next time.